start this season for him. I think last season, if we were doing this show in the summer, I would have had some serious reservations with the tackling, especially in space. Where he is. Again, we kind of talked about like Owen kind of brought it up, like not the most tremendous athlete on the planet here, but the fact that he has cleaned that up, right? Again, referencing PFF, and it turns out it kind of mirrors what I kind of saw is like the missed tackle percentage is way down. Now, obviously, we're still only about halfway through the season, but it seems to have gotten a lot better. And the film does show that USC game. Take a look at Duke. Take a look at maybe Purdue as well. Like that's what you see. You see him wrap up better. Again, a guy who I think has a great football mind out there for sure. And I think Owen hit it on the head where it's like for him, he's not going to be the guy who's the post safety in a single high, look, right? The middle field close. Like that's just not going to be. His range is fine when you're talking like between the numbers, right? I think that is where he can, the football IQ comes out, right? Recognition of routes, all of that, and he's able to close. When it comes to outside, the numbers and getting to stuff like that, I just don't see how he's going to be able to do that. The speed is definitely a question mark. He is definitely he has to be, if he's going to succeed, be one of those guys who is process reaction time, a step ahead, right? Just fully understanding what's happening on every play to get there and make one, because it's just that is what's going to cover up, I think, the athletic deficiencies. And yeah, playing top down, split safety look, filling and making plays, like that's, I think, where he will shine. And I think like you look at, for me, what I've seen of like safety rooms and where you want him, like he's probably right now in that like safety 3, safety 4 in your room, where it's like you don't know, maybe a starter at some point, but it's going to be like a strong reserve where you don't feel like you're going to lose a whole lot, when he's coming in.
So realizing at this point, we've looked at 5 games. Do you see a world where he doesn't get drafted, or are you highly confident that floor is a draftable floor?
I think, especially with kind of like what Jake touched on, like we covered Illinois in our preview series this past summer when we were going through and watching like the players at each position, kind of building our draft portfolio, our basis of players we're going to expect are going to be coming out this year. I remember specifically Miles Scott. I profiled him as similar to what he is today, where it's like more of a strong safety, fill and tackle, special teams type player, where he can eventually develop into a split safety, strong safety starter for you down the road if you give him enough time. And he can also fill in on special teams and be a good role depth player until then. But he did have issues where I was like, okay, he's going to be that kind of player, but he doesn't really have the strongest tackling skills. Then I watched, in preparation for this episode, some of the 2025 games he's played so far, and he's definitely cleaned that up. Like he still brings the boom and he'll fly around, but he definitely is a guy that, like, at the worst, you're getting a special teams guy who's cleaned up his tackling skills, and he is smart when it comes to knowing his role on defense. Now, there are some plays where like he'll bite a little bit extra on misdirection, especially if he's going to be one of the more deeper defenders. You don't want him to give up what's behind him because he's trying to come down and be too aggressive to attack and make those plays, because he trusts that he can be the tackler and make those and finish off plays for his defense. So I think there's definitely room for him to grow. And kind of like what Jake said, he's definitely a safety 3, safety 4 immediately. You're not drafting him to be an instant plug-and-play starter for you on your defense. But when you're looking at a player of his caliber, but not only does he have the experience on special teams, but just having that floor from being a run defender and having been a starter for Illinois, which is a solid defense for the past few seasons now, there's definitely a world where I see him drafted. Like I don't really see him not being drafted. I think he'd have to test extremely poorly to go undrafted in general, just because you're already not expecting him to be the greatest of athletes. And if he goes in and is able to just have serviceable or just not below your standards testing where it's like super outliers, I think his style of play is a lot better for him to be drafted. Like I have a late, like around 5, around 6 grade on him, whereas like you got a day 3 pick for a guy like this that you're going to bring him in high floor. Maybe you can get a starter out of it, but he's going to be a rosterable player.
Jake, how about you?
Yeah, he strikes me as somebody who might just not even test at the combine, wait for the pro day, get those numbers a little bit a little bit inflated for him. So the testing numbers, maybe don't look like, oh my gosh, like he is, running in the 4.6s, 4.7s maybe, and the agility isn't what you want to see, and like stuff like that. So he may just skip it all together and just kind of go out and do like the on-field stuff with the drills, where you see like, okay, changing direction's fine with him. He goes and make a play on the ball, right? Like he looks the part of a safety rather than like, okay, I'm worried about this testing. So yeah, I think at the very least, a guy who, wants to hit, wants to tackle, you're going to get that guy on special teams pretty quickly, of like, he's going to be able to be a part of that. As far as draftable grades, yeah, absolutely. It's still a day 3 player, I think, but it is going to be somebody that, teams look at and they see the body of work, they see the improvement as a tackler. You see enough football IQ and effort and willingness to, buy in on special teams as his defense. I think that's somebody who gets drafted.
Okay. So to give the audience a little bit of context, on average, between 17 and 20 safeties get drafted every year. And we're likely going to be podcasting on about 27. So at some point, there will be a threshold of, do we see that the player might profile to be more undrafted? But the next safety we're going to go over is Peyton Bowen from Oklahoma. Jake, do you want to kick this one off?
Yeah. I think the few things that stood out to me about Peyton Bowen is, I think, just kind of, the willing to be around the football and hit as well. Like, I think you see him as a player who is, again, just kind of bought into the physicality of the game more so than anything else. I do think, sure tackling, come downhill, play the run, right? Another guy that's, I feel like, more so, a processing guy, read react guy versus this explosive playmaker who's going to be all over the field, right? Cutting off, running back lanes and turning him back inside as a fill player, or, working that sideline to sideline range. Like, this is more of the player who, again, is kind of going to be thrust into that, okay, are you strong safety, nickel, dime backer type of player versus, kind of these, we're seeing a lot of, still plenty of middle field close stuff. Like, he's not going to be that post player. He is still somebody who, even at 201, I think the frame is good enough. I think he can probably add to it if he wanted to a little bit. But yeah, when it comes to defending the run, being physical, playing in that short zone area in the hook, he's going to be fine in that regard. But I don't think you see a player who, is going to have those overwhelming athletic traits where you go, look at this. Look at how much we can build, into a ceiling for this guy. He again, kind of, to me at least, at this juncture, seems like the, again, guy to get in the rotation, put him on special teams, that type of safety, where I feel like he is still somebody teams are going to be interested in, but isn't, okay, I see these high level traits. I see some flashes of the mental game. Like, we can build this guy into a strong starter quickly. This still feels more like the role player who brings that intensity as a safety, more so around the line of scrimmage.
And Owen, I know that you also covered Peyton Bowen, I think, when we previewed Oklahoma, but what have you seen this year from Peyton Bowen that might be different from when we covered him over the summer?
So he was, when we were covering over summer, this year is like his true year being like a down-to-down consistent starter for Oklahoma. Previously, he was hovering around like the 20 to 30 snap range when it came to playing games. And now he's not there for, 60 plus snaps, depending on how long the game goes. He's their actual starting safety at this point. And that was one of the big talking points of when we were covering Oklahoma for that preview. Was like, okay, we have some guys who are maybe not as proven as starters. Can they continue to develop? Because I really did, leading up to this, liked Peyton Bowen a lot. There was a couple of those Oklahoma players that fit that similar mold, like Asamigo, the linebacker, Ramasigo, however you say his name. But Bowen was one of those guys where it's like, okay, you kind of see and get what you see, where you like kind of what Jay was talking about. I agree mostly with everything he said. When it comes to him being that, come downhill, run thumper type safety, he's going to need to be a special teamer to really stick around. I unlike a lot of the guys here, like I talked about, we have those two different buckets. Some of those guys can still have some decent ball production. I feel like Bowen because he hasn't been a starter as much, hasn't been able to show that off as much. So it's more of an unknown. So for me, he's a bit lower on the end than some of the other guys we will talk about today that are in that same kind of archetype of bigger body, dense, can go and actually make some tackles and lay the wood, be your more typical like buzz down type of safety around the line of scrimmage. But for me, what was really interesting about Bowen was he had, when I was looking into his special teams reps, because special teams, especially for safeties, is key for them to make a roster. If you're going to be a safety that isn't in the starting rotation, you have to be a special teams player, either on punt return, kick return, so punt coverage, kick coverage, because that's where the majority of, you need these higher athlete guys who can tackle to make it. So I have like a whole specific, it's one of the only positions, if not the only position I have that I have a specific grade for, a special teams ability in their grading profile for me. And Bowen was something you don't really see a lot of when you're looking for some of these guys to transition as a special teamer. He had experience returning punts. Now he had a couple muffs, wasn't the best out there on some reps, but other reps he did look really solid when it came to catching and returning. So I felt like that was something that I was kind of shocked by, especially when I looked at what his profile and thinking like, okay, I didn't the athleticism doesn't really pop off the screen for you, and you're not really looking at this player as being a guy that's like, oh, he's a guy that can be a return player for you. So when I saw that was something where I was like, oh, that's an interesting wrinkle that he brings to his evaluation where like, okay, he can, if you're looking for a guy who can add an element to your special teams, he's adding even a different element that finding returners in general is kind of more of a difficult thing, especially nowadays. So for me, he definitely, that saves his draft grade for me, and he makes him a draftable grade. I just think he needs to continue to progress and get definitely some more coverage reps and ability to make plays in coverage, which we just really haven't seen as much. We've seen the run defending, we've seen the tackling, we just need to see him show up more as a coverage player overall throughout the rest of Oklahoma season.
So I'm going to go check something out in PFF on him, but the picture was him blocking a punt. I've obviously removed the punter and stuff from the graphic. I'm going to go. Do you guys see any PFF stats for block punts?
I can check that real quick for you.
I'm going on PFF right now to go look it up. Oh, and it would help if I have the right position.
That's weird. It has like snap distribution. I think when it comes to like, where, is he on kick coverage, punt return, punt coverage, field goal block, all of that. I don't think it gives you a specific grade for each unless I'm missing something.
It doesn't. Well, it gives you if they're a returner, there's a different grade for it, but not for like straight up with the other stuff. But I did find the clip. It was his first year playing for Oklahoma in 2023 that he got the block punt. I just had it up. It was against SMU where he was on punt block coverage, gets through clean. It was kind of more of a missed blocking assignment, and then he was able to make the play. And like I said, so he's got experience in every phase of the special team, especially like even multiple different areas on punt return. For me, it was just surprising, especially for a guy that I didn't really peg as like this super great athlete to be like their punt returner. Like last season, it was the 2024 season that he was their go-to punt returner. At least for, I think he had, if I can pull it up, the number of returns he had. I can't tell if this is because he has 63 reps on punt return, but I don't know if that's him as the returner itself.
Typically and I'm looking at PFF and over is this season? So So this season alone, he has 57 special team snaps.
Yeah.
Right, to your point. So you're definitely getting somebody that can be a core member of your special teams, which you're going to need if you're going to be safety 3 or safety 4.
Yeah. Right.
Which was the point that you were making all along. Yeah.
Just pulling up, so I went on his sports reference page here, and he had in 2024 as a sophomore, he had 25 punt returns for 209 total yards. This year he has yet to return a punt, but he has returned one kick. So he's he had more return opportunities even before that. In his freshman year, he had 5 punt returns. So he has experience as a returner both on punt and kick returns, and he has experience on punt, kick coverage, and punt block coverage, and kickoff coverage, and kick return coverage. So he's got all the phases you'd want, especially, and even now he's on the starting defense. He's going to be out there for 2-point conversions, field goal blocks, stuff like that. So he's definitely a guy that you're going to look at to be like, okay, if I need to draft a dude who maybe is behind the ball when it comes to being a defender or a safety that I project to be a starter, at least I'm getting a special teams ace type prospect if I'm going to burn around 6 or around 7 grade on him.
Yes, and it also appears as though Bowen is a junior, age 21. So he may have another year of college eligibility left.
Yeah, I have him down as a 3-year junior right now, so he has another one, and PFF has his draft class listed down as if he exhausts eligibility this year, which he already did, and then exhausts his eligibility next year without taking a red shirt, he would be in the 2027 class. But so he has an opportunity to go back, which with how he's looked so far this year and just the limited amount of snaps he had leading up to this season, I would maybe anticipate that happening unless he really turns it on. But just the fact that he has no real production in pass coverage this year specifically, I think he'd probably want to go back and juice those numbers up a bit more with the second year of starting if I was going to predict what his decision would be.
Okay, so the next player is Terry Moore from Duke. So Terry Moore was really high on a lot of summer scouting safety boards. My understanding is he hasn't played at all this season. Jake, what do you have on Terry Moore?
I will say one thing that I find really interesting is he seems to be like a better version of Sione Vaki, who it was talked about quite a bit. The Lions obviously made him a decently high pick considering because he came to Duke as a running back and carried it 29 times for 128. So that I find really interesting that they're like, yeah, let's put you at safety. Let's see how that goes, which is super fascinating. But I do like the fact that even though he, is new to this position, it kind of felt like, at least from what I saw last year, that the more the kind of, if you looked for like later games in the season, the more you saw the process start to slow down for him. I think he was early in the season. I know there were a couple of games where it was like he is still sort of figuring things out a little bit, and I feel like he really hit that stride probably even more like, I'm trying to think of which October game I was thinking of, but like I think really found it in terms of like anticipating where guys are going to break on route concepts and anticipating where the quarterback's going with the football. Like it felt like he had a great understanding of what was going on around him. And I do think he is, unlike I think the first two we've kind of talked about, has a little more flexibility and agility. And, I guess shouldn't be super surprising since he's being recruited as, he comes out, he's going to be a running back right at Duke. I think you would kind of look to that and go, yeah, that makes sense. That tracks. I think you could probably ask him to wear a few more hats in the defense than maybe the first two we've talked about. Zone coverage, match coverage. I feel like he is, again, was doing a great job of getting up to speed in this last season. And unfortunately, we haven't seen him, obviously, as you mentioned. But and another guy who I think, again, isn't like, probably the fastest, right, most explosive, but is, again, efficient, changing direction, flexible, and a guy who I think maybe more so than most as well, like understands maybe where his athleticism gaps are. And what that leads to is smarter pursuit angles, whether it be to the sideline, whether it be, coming downhill to fit the run. Like I think he has a good understanding of like, okay, my limitation is this. I know what angle I need to take, depending on the player, right? Is, faster running back, faster receiver on the, like plays going to the boundary, right? Screens, quick passing game, what have you. It seems like he has a good understanding of all that. So yeah, it is a real shame when I, looked at this, it was, you sent out the list of safeties where it was like, oh, he's just not, he hasn't played this year because he's hurt. Because I do feel like this is somebody we'd be talking about a heck of a lot more when it comes to the 2026 draft because of how good I think he has done in this transition from running back to safety.
No, Owen, had you watched Terry Moore ahead of the podcast list that came out, or was this your first watch?
So this is my first eyes on him. I know, and I was watching 24 tape. Obviously, he hasn't played yet this year, but I also, I use PFF Ultimate for my film watching, and it's funny because whenever a player has like offensive snaps, even for like one snap as a blocker, like you'll see it like D lineman, you have like a D tackle that ends up being like a fullback. The whole front thing of their grades and their snaps is like offense, even though they've only played it a handful of times. So I'm going to look for his film, and it looks like he has 0 grades for 2024 and 2023. And I'm like, that's weird. But I realized, I'm looking at the offensive stuff, and I see that he has actual offensive reps in his freshman year. And I'm like, he's a guy similar to, I think it was the one corner from Notre Dame, if I remember correctly, watching over this past.
I remember you were saying like there's a reason the wide receiver switched to corner.
Yeah, because he had a bunch of drops. But Terry Moore was, for me, I went and just watched some of his offensive tape before I dove into his defensive stuff, just to kind of get a profile of what he was as an athlete, what they were utilizing him as when they first brought him in. And yeah, he was a running back. A lot of what he did was, for what I saw specifically the UNC game, kind of like a out of the backfield type player where they utilize his athleticism and space to get the ball to him and allow him to operate both in the receiving game and as a rusher. So it makes sense for him to if he does switch over to the defensive side, go to like more of a DB role. Whereas like we've even seen like in the past, the running back to linebacker switch, like Khalil Mullings from Michigan last year, or that was the other way around, linebacker to running back. But the fact that he was able to go from running back to safety shows a comfortability they have with his ball skills in general. And I think that did show up. He had 5 interceptions last year. I do like his range quite a bit. Like I do think he has that speed to get sideline to sideline. His best tape for me was when he was a single high, free safety type player, able to roam over the top. And they asked him to like go from a spot and cover over the top. There was a couple of his picks that were just him trailing over the top and either jumping off underneath balls or being in the right position because he's able to get over there. And while he has a corner, maybe in a cover 3 position, to get the initial ball, he's able to react to it and make a play on the ball after it's deflected. So for me, there was a lot of plays like that where I was like, okay, they just asked him to go back there and play fast and be an athlete and try to be more of a natural coverage player. And he succeeded in a lot that way. And he had a ton of ball production because of that. He definitely looked new to the position when it came to filling run lanes, understanding angles. He's a willing tackler, but really just had to be more of an ankle biter. And while I do like his athleticism, also when it comes to his smoothness and agility to be able to match and man coverage, you could also see the underdevelopment there at the position because he isn't good positioning as a man coverage player on like tight ends because he is a better athlete than most of them are, but he doesn't get his head around in time or he's not able to make the plays on the ball where you would see a more of a highly developed or more natural to the position player who was recruited out of high school to do it would have more of those instincts because they played it more frequently and they've been focusing on it more. So I was really excited. If I would have watched him before the season, I would have been really excited to see how he progresses and how he kind of takes those plays, those 5 interceptions, big turnover plays. He had like 5 interceptions, 2 more dropped interceptions, according to PFF, and like 7 other forced incompletions. So he had a ton of ball production for a guy who isn't familiar with the position. I was excited to, hopefully, if he can come back this year, I don't know what the extent of his injury is, but to see if he can develop more just from being that positional switch type player. Because as Jake was saying, as the season went on, he definitely progressed more and more with processing and understanding zone coverages and what his responsibilities were in other more complicated roles. So I think as a player that you maybe want to buy his stock while it's low because of the injury, if he comes out this year, I do think there's a big swing you can take there because he has some upside that you saw in just like the first few seasons of him playing the position.
And to be specific, the injury was a torn ACL in Duke's last game of 2024. So maybe he's available for the All-Star circuit. Right? Because I think this would be a player, if we see him at the Shrine or the Senior Bowl, that's actually going to be really important for him because there's not going to be a lot of game tape from him this year. So
yeah, Yeah, that's
How
the tricky
long
part.
does a torn ACL take to recover from? Jake, any idea?
Well, fully, I think it's longer, fully longer than we think. Being back out there, you know, is I mean, you probably put it at like a 12-month thing. Like I know Green Bay's dealt with that, all these really differently. Of like, oh, we're gonna bring this guy out when he's ready. 10, 11 months, and it's kind of like he's not quite the same yet until that maybe following year where it's like, okay, now we're ramping back up to 90, 95, 100%, at least based on what I think seen. I think we kind of hoped the Adrian Peterson thing was going to be the model going forward of like, oh yeah, he just come back and it's totally fine. And it's like, no, not really. Adrian Peterson was probably just an alien from a different galaxy, doing that. So yeah, it does seem like maybe Shrine Senior where he's out there and it's, he's doing some things and he can. I don't imagine he would if he were to declare, right. Yeah, I don't imagine he would miss the testing right in late February, early March. But yeah, I think it's beneficial to him to just kind of be able to like ease back in, and really feel like himself. If he were to declare by like training camp, it would probably be best for him. Like I'm sure he's gonna. Seems like the kind of player, at least when you watch him, that like he's gonna try to be out there as soon as possible. But yeah, it probably will take probably more time than we'd want it to.
Okay. So on the next safety is Earl Little Jr. from Florida State. What do you have on Earl Little Jr.?
Well, he's a guy that we were talking about Terry Moore as a recruit. The interesting part of him as a recruit is he came out as a running back recruit before being transferred over. We have a different kind of transfer as a recruit, but this time it's from school to school where we have Earl Little Jr. here, who was recruited originally to Alabama towards the twilight end of Nick Saban's run there. And now he transfers over to Florida State. It's his second season playing for the Seminoles. He was there for that disastrous last season with DJ Uiagalelei as a quarterback, which they've turned it around definitely. I think they're definitely in the upswing now. From that, and they definitely can thank a lot of the guys they got transferred over, including like Earl Little Jr., who, for me, this was interesting. And I was surprised to see his size listed only at 6'1", 199 when I was looking up his numbers, because most of my favorite tape from him is when he's buzzed down at that second level as like an additional linebacker type player where he's able to scrape over the top and be a run fit supporter. He is a guy that has movement skills as well. Like he's not just this big thumper. He's got a mean, nasty streak when he wants to come lay some tackles. He's more than willing to trigger downhill and fill some run lanes and run through some dudes' faces at full sprint. But he also is able to move a bit more in the open field, and you saw that a bit in this year's games. I believe it was the one I watched for him was Alabama and then Miami. There was a play, I believe, against Alabama, if I'm not mistaken, where he was able to track down the guy in the end zone and make the break on the ball to cause a pass breakup down the field. It was like a 30, 40-yard throw to the end zone. He was able to close the distance there and make a play. So I think with him, you're looking at a player that has that higher pedigree of being a highly touted recruit at one of the best P4 colleges, or if not the most highly acclaimed P4 college of the generation, and then transferring to Florida State to get that playing time once Nick Saban left, and his ability to show off some of that length, that athleticism, that size, that willingness to be this more physical presence on the third level while not sacrificing a ton of athleticism to be this bigger, stronger guy is impressive. So I think all of the athletic and like the traits that will make him like a combine superstar are there. Like if he came in and tested really well or just looked great in shorts, I'd assume that he'd get a lot of buzz coming out of that testing bracket. But for me, there's a lot more stuff I'd like to see with him developmental wise when it comes to like understanding some more zone things. He's definitely bit, he is that aggressive player, and he's bit on some stuff to trying to be aggressive and come downhill more. And then the recovery is just not there. So he's still a work in progress when it comes to his coverage ability for me, but he does have all the talent there when it comes to like length, size, speed, aggressiveness that you don't really, it's like the unteachables you got there. So I think especially being at another P4 school that's going to be competitive this year, you're going to get a lot of opportunities to see him go against some higher level competition and see if he can really adjust that in his fourth season in college.
Jake, how about you and Earl Little Jr.?
Yeah, I think the kind of the biggest note I had on him was, if I were to be really, really succinct, was like traits. Like you can see it in the way he moves, in the way that, like, oh yeah, he was built to be a top recruit. Like, there are those moments where it's just like, quick trigger downhill, easy accelerator, closes space in a hurry, like that's no problem. Or yeah, flipping the hips, change direction, go make a play, on the football. The Alabama game was excellent. He was, filling with authority, right? He's coming into, with the shoulder pad, wanting to do some damage. But I do think you saw a little bit more of, like, especially this Miami game, more recently, of like, he's aggressive. And I think Owen highlighted that really well, of like, he is, and then it's like, all right, can you play in control more when you're making contact with guys, when you're filling against running backs? Can you play under control in space a little more when, you got receivers coming your way, and you have to play the right angle, and all of that, where I feel like it is still, kind of a work in progress, the developmental process for him, where it just has to be like, yeah, okay, we know you have the traits, just can you play under control? Can you see things, develop a little quicker to be able to use all of what you have physically to become the dominant player you were heralded to be as a recruit? And so I think that's where, for me, it's like, okay, he has, maybe not the mental side of the floor, but he has the athletic side of the floor, where it's like, okay, that floor can get you in an NFL building, right? Because of, what you're going to see in probably the 40 and the 3-cone and other things like that. And the vert, like, especially, I feel like his explosion numbers would be off the charts if he tested tomorrow. That gets you in the building. But once you're there, prove that you can take care of the mental stuff, be a reliable tackler, right? Prove that, like, all of the, like, finer details and precision of playing a position at the NFL level come to you, because I feel like that's where, again, there's still runway this season, right? The Alabama game was great, but I didn't love what I saw in the Miami game. I feel like he's going to have more matchups down the line where it's like, okay, prove in some of these high-profile matchups like Alabama that you're building more of the mental game, the processing game, right? The controlled play, like, bring more of that down the stretch. Because if you do that, right, I think all of these splash plays, will still be there. It'll just be like, okay, like, oh wow, that's a sick open field tackle. I'm glad we have him back there making those plays, right? Like, I'm glad we have him in space, rather than, like, maybe after the taste of the Miami game is kind of like, oh man, I don't really want him in space. Like, I hope he's far enough away from the play when those things are coming his way. Like, I feel like there's just, as soon as, like, that switch starts to flip more for him, I think it can be talked about a lot more, because right now it seems like that aggression and that the physical stuff, it all takes over, and it's like, okay, controlled, deep breaths, execution, right? All of that stuff, I think, just has to get better.
Okay, next player, AJ Halsey from LSU. So, Owen, you want to kick this one off?
You want to talk about aggressive players? This guy will run through anybody in front of him, and sometimes to his detriment. And specifically thinking about that Ole Miss game, there was a play where, like, he's running up to Phil as, like, a little short wide receiver screen, and he's so amped up to just run through the face of the wide receiver blocking for the other guy that he doesn't make the play on the ball carrier that he probably should have, and he gets upfield and is able to get some more yardage. And he definitely should have, with how the angle he was taking and build. Like, you trust his ability to make tackles, but 6 foot 222, you see this, and you can think about, you can see, like, the level of density and muscle he's got on his frame. And when you watch him, he utilizes that a ton. I don't know how high of a level of an athlete he is when it comes to being, like, a single high post, free safety type over the middle. But if you have a role in a split safety backfield where you're anticipating needing someone who can come in and fill gaps and be aggressive and attack, and when he plants and comes downhill, it's kind of like, I remember when I fell in love with Jalen Petrie at Baylor. a lot of the question marks with him was like, okay, he's plays like the star role for Baylor. There's question marks whether or not he can be at this rangy, more NFL style safety. But I was watching the film and being like, okay, I can see the concerns when he's asked to do like those rare drops in coverage where you're asking him to do that role as being like more of a single high or even as like a two deep, the free safety half of the two deep. But when you're looking at him plant and burst downhill and explode, it literally still, but like in a more vertical sense, coming downhill to fill or drive on some lower level passes, you can definitely see like, okay, he has the explosiveness, he has some athleticism in there that if he was to be deployed maybe differently in a different style of defense, or if you are more of a split safety defense, could you utilize him in the free safety position but still have more of that sure-handed tackling? I think you could unlock more of that there. So for me, Halsey is a player that, while you can love a lot of what you see on tape right now with the explosive athleticism, the aggressiveness, he does show some good ball skills, especially so far this season. LSU being able to jump routes over the middle, being that more middle of the field safety type player. I do think that he's going to have some untapped potential when it comes to what you can deploy him schematically when he gets to the NFL, especially with some of these newfangled defenses that have like a ton of guys who can be these more coverage gurus who have safety background or DB background. So he's a guy that I'm super excited to see what team goes with him, and I can project him to a bunch of different teams, and he'd be like to play a different role for 5 different defenses.
Jake, how about you and AJ Halsey?
Yeah, this I probably, because we've already talked about Taff, probably the most excited I was to talk about any of these guys for this show, just because I do think he has, as Owen mentioned, that like explosiveness in that short area of like can trigger downhill in an instant. Like he feels like the type of player who, you get that post snap rotation and he's in a robber look. Like I wouldn't want to be coming over the middle of the field. I would not want to be there. I would not want to be the quarterback having to make that decision because, again, he makes plays on the ball a ton as well. I think experience is another, word that comes to mind with Halsey is just, at least for PFF, 2,378 snaps in his career and has worked up through, New Mexico. And then he was in the Big 12 with Houston. Now he's at LSU. Like, that steady progression of like, okay, I can keep moving up. I can keep moving up. Feels a lot like obviously Cam Ward, who is, incarnate Word, Washington State, Miami. Like he's making all of the stops and he's progressing the right way. And yeah, I do think, Owen highlighted it even in the Florida game a little bit. The tackling was like, okay, it looks a little bit more like, buddy, you're trying to set a tone here, which is totally fine. But you can set a tone while making, controlled tackles as well. Forced fumble against Ole Miss was awesome. Love seeing guys, be opportunistic in that regard as well, not just, to create turnovers with interceptions. But yeah, it does seem like he, that experience, he's leaning on it a ton, and it helps, right? Diagnosing plays, triggering on the ball, how he looks in zone coverage. It doesn't seem to be panicky, right? Doesn't seem to feel like he's out of place when zone coverage is being deployed. And yeah, I mean, he has that edge. He plays with it. And as long as, again, kind of, we mentioned it with Little, but I feel like with Halsey, for me, it's just kind of like, okay, I just need to set the tone, but lock in while you set the tone. And like, I think we're going to be okay. Because I do think the tackling as a whole is very good, but it does have those moments where you kind of go and like, okay, we need to, like, that play. I would like to make that play. And I know you can make that play, just kind of do it. And yeah, I do think like he is more of the like explosive linear player rather than necessarily being the flip the hips, doesn't have that sustained burst and doesn't have like the elite agility where it's like, okay, well, he kind of lines in like, okay, maybe he could get away with some deep safety stuff, but I'd rather be in the split field stuff. I'd rather him buzzing down. I'd rather him dropping as kind of a robber look. Like I would be much more comfortable with him doing a lot of those things. And even if he wanted to, get creative with the big nickel stuff. I mean, Buffalo's a great example of watching a guy like Teron Johnson really thrive in it as kind of a big dude playing nickel. Like, you might be able to get away with that as well. And it would probably, again, have to be more of a like you probably want him have to have him be physical at the line of scrimmage rather than trying to kind of mirror some of the slot receivers. But it does seem like if you want him to be a part of your run fit, and you don't want to sacrifice athleticism, right? You don't want to bring the base defense in. Maybe if you have the right pieces, you can potentially get away with it with a player like Halsey as well. So I do really like him a lot. He probably, of these guys, is near that top 2 or 3 of this group for sure, in my opinion.
Okay. And then, Jake, do you want to kick off Jalen Husky from Maryland? And before you kick him off, I want to give a shout out to Mel Kiper because I was watching an episode of First Draft on ESPN. Mel Kiper called out Husky on that episode. Nobody in the Draft Professor chat up until that point in time had ever mentioned him. And, he wasn't on any of the player lists or any of the other podcasts that we had done. So shout out to Mel Kiper. But Jake, what do you have on Jalen Husky from Maryland?
Probably the least of these guys, just again, as also somebody who really didn't have, a whole lot on him coming in. And maybe that's a good thing, get fresh eyes at a player like this, who I think is another one who, plays opportunistic ball. He's in he's in the right spot a lot. When plays are there to be made in terms of creating turnovers. I think I wanted to pull up this as something where you look at his passer rating allowed when targeted over the last 3 seasons is kind of insane when you think about it. So 2023 was 42.5 passer rating allowed. Just a really disappointing 2024, just 71, really disappointed because obviously this year it's 28, which is nuts. PFF has him credited with 9 picks, 5 PBUs over the last 3 seasons. Again, just really nutty stuff when it comes to, being a playmaker on the back end of a defense. And really all I've gotten to see from him is what was it? It was last year's game against Oregon, which I thought was really impressive actually with what he did as a strong safety, operating close to the line of scrimmage, being a force as a run defender, right? He has the size and the frame to handle that, coming down and being a run defender in that regard. I thought Penn State, he was actually pretty effective there as well. And then now you got him, doing some more stuff at the back end when they're doing split safety work. Like he is making plays back there, which I think is really exciting. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, if I look back here, I'm pretty sure, early season, by the way, for Maryland last year, he was playing corner.
Yes.
He was not playing safety, which, I think when you maybe look at it a little bit more like, okay, yeah, he isn't like this, to me at least, like not this super high-end twitchy, like insane athlete where it's like, yeah, if he's an opportunistic player and he can create turnovers and like he understands the game and you don't see him as this overly twitchy player, like, yeah, throw him at safety and see what happens. Like I honestly didn't really see any of it because as somebody who really doesn't have like Villanova, Virginia, UConn, Michigan State, any of those games from last year, that was kind of surprising to see because you see him, I think, more confident at least when he was doing a lot of strong safety work last year, and then again this year where they're giving him plenty of responsibilities. He's got, at least PFF has him credited with about 50 snaps in the slot as well, so they're moving him around. He's just not a player you've wanted to target so far this season. So yeah, really impressed from kind of the limited amount I've seen from him, just a few games.
Yeah. So Owen, he's the player of the show. Like I was anxious to hear your opinion of Jalen Husky because Mel Kiper had me convinced that Buffalo has to take him in round 3. But where do you have Jalen Husky?
This was the watch of the session for me because I have access to all of the games he's played, and according to I think I have it down here. He's credited with over the past 3 seasons, based on PFF, between PFF regular and PFF Ultimate. It's kind of weird how they divide it up, but they have him down as 10 interceptions, one dropped interception and 11 forced completions over the past 3 seasons between Bowling Green in 2023, then Maryland in 2024, and now Maryland now in 2025. I went back and watched those games where he was exclusively as a corner. And I think for me, of this group of players, I feel the most comfortable with him in coverage because he has that experience as a corner specifically. And then even going to this year, like I definitely agree with Jake. Like when he got moved to safety, you saw him unlock more of that run defending and tackling they maybe were missing when he was out in the boundary, not getting as active in the run defense, especially like that Oregon game where he was coming down. They tried to run some more big set power running type plays, and he's taking on fullbacks with a full head of steam, then getting off the blocks and making tackles in the backfield. Like he was buzzing up and filling the run, despite also being a guy who now with his movement to safety and being a split safety. I don't think he's going to be your traditional single high free safety type player, but he is going to be a guy that like you can trust to be that more deep zone defender. And when he was even when he was buzzed up, so the Wisconsin game and Washington game this year, he was utilized a lot in that intermediate zone, like the 7 to 10 yard depth, being in the hook, curl flats areas. And he was making good plays and keeping a good head on the swivel and making pass breakups and being able to be around the ball a lot in those areas. And especially when he was in those areas, when they wanted to just throw the passes and dump them down, he was able to rally up and make good tackles. So for me, I think he's a guy that I came away with wanting to dive even more into, even though he's the guy I dove into the most for this exercise, because he has so much when you're looking at his corner tape and his transition to safety and how relatively new to the safety position he is compared to what he was playing before. And the fact that he came from MAC school, always going to be a key to my heart. But he's a guy that, for me, if I'm looking at a player that like I need someone who can run a bit, but isn't like I'm not super really over concerned about that, but is willing to be physical, has ball production, has played all over the defense in different alignments and different roles. He's a guy that really jumped out to me. So I'm not surprised if he was a third round pick by Mel Kiper, because from where I'm standing right now, coming out of this group, he's one of like the handful of players that I come out of this like, okay, if I'm going to target some players out of this group, he's in that bucket of I'm hammering the table if he's on the board come around safety picking time, which is usually like that day 2, maybe later day 2 type of range.
Cool. Well, it's worth the price of admission there. So 2 more safeties to go. So Jake, do you want to kick off Zakee Wheatley from Penn State?
Yeah, I could definitely do that. I don't think it would surprise people that he goes to Penn State, just based on probably how I'm going to describe him, at least to start off.
But we're not scouting the helmet, but we're not surprised.
We're not surprised. Yeah. We're not throwing him in the bucket. I mean, we're just not surprised. We're just not like, oh, this is where he plays. I mean, it kind of is that simple to start out. Like, if you were to say, like, all right, so from this group of safeties, who wins the underwear Olympics? Yeah, this is the bet. It's Wheatley for sure. He's going to win this. Because I do think, like, when you watch him, you go, oh yeah, okay, he can run the 4.4s. Like I don't that will not shock me. 3-cone, all of that stuff. Like, he is going to be that type of guy where you go, oh yeah, he's doing all this at, at least what we list here, 6'2", 202. Like that's fascinating when it comes to that, because again, he is extremely fluid, extremely explosive, like all of that is perfectly encapsulates. Like, okay, yeah, he can cover a ton of ground, and I think like is one of the few guys where I go, okay, yeah, if he gets out of position, if he bites on a fake, if he's biting on something in a route combination where he shouldn't, and that's where the quarterback wanted him to, like, he is the guy where I go, okay, yeah, he can probably like get away with doing so because of how good the recovery speed can be, and then the athleticism, and like, if there's a throw off target and he's closing on the throw, like, I expect him to elevate for the football and make a play. Like, he's that explosive on top of it. And so, like, yeah, rangy, if you want him to be that player, like, yeah, I think rangy post safety, like, he can certainly do it based on the athleticism. I think that is very, very clear. I do think there are certainly moments where he, is in position and he's, diagnosing things very, very quickly from back there and driving on it and getting into good position. I think it's a little bit hot and cold at times where it feels like, he's biting or he is going exactly where the offense wants him to and not quite picking up on a few things here and there. But when he does, when all of it's together and the picture is complete, like, you forget it. Like you're gonna have a terrible time out there. I do think he is still somebody, again, even as big as he is, I would like to see him be a more formed tackler as well. I think there are a lot of occasions where that comes to bite him a little bit. But again, when you're talking about, like, with a lot of these guys, like, all right, the athletic floor can get you in the building, and it's like, okay, this is a guy that we would like, in the middle field close looks where he could take, this back part of the field away. He can take the deep throws away because you have to account for how much ground he can cover in so little time. And so I do think for him, like, he is probably somebody, who late February, early March is probably going to get that mock draft bump. He is. He's going to get that bump of like, oh, wow, this RAS card is fully green. Like, yeah, sure, I'll take a player like that, right? Like, that's how I see him at this point. Like, I do think his trigger working downhill, I think, has to get better as well, especially over everything else. So, but again, athletic freak who, if you're into that middle field close game, like, you're probably taking a swing here.
So, Owen, where are you and Zakee Wheatley from Penn State?
I was both like kind of how Jake was saying, like, super excited when you're seeing like all the different ways he's able to cover ground and legitimately pop off the screen when you're looking at him as an athlete covering sideline to sideline, being able to be an ever-present player in coverage where if you lay the ball up a little too lofty, it's going to be like, all right, you might run the risk of him being able to beat your receiver to the ball and pick it off. So you have to be more succinct and decisive with your balls, or it's just kind of shutting it down the deep areas for you. So he's a guy who can be that kind of rangy player athletically. He can be that threat. And then I was also a bit disappointed because he was the guy I watched immediately after watching Halsey, where they're different players. Halsey's 6', 222, and this is 6'2", 202, with definitely more athleticism than a guy like Halsey is. But at the same time, you see Wheatley fly around. You're like, okay, he's got the speed and acceleration, and he looks like he wants to go drive through people's faces and make them eat dirt. But when you're watching him compared to like a guy like that, it's like, okay, you can see the difference there where Halsey's able to bring his weight with him and really embrace being that more physical thumping presence, where Wheatley plays fast but isn't really able to play physical through that speed. So for me, if you temper your expectations for a guy who's 6'2", for him not to be this giant thumper and be more of that stereotypical like middle of the field safety, where kind of similar, and they're not similar physically wise. I feel like their play style was a bit more like similar to Makuba was at Texas last year, where you have a guy that can be more of a thumper, and then he's the rangy over the top guy. But if you want him to buzz down and like fill the gap from 20 yards off, he can fly through that area with the speed and make up for that. I do just need to see him be a better tackler. Wish he could maybe add on another like 5 pounds and maybe bring a bit more oomph to his hits. And overall, just be a bit more consistent with his coverage, even like in the UCLA game when he was asked to be more of a lower zone coverage player, kind of like what we talked about with Husky just a second ago, where he was a guy like you see like the plays made in the lower zone coverages, where if you're a safety, maybe more so for corner, you're expecting those plays to be made. But a safety, if you can make those plays on top of being more of a deep safety type player, that's when you start getting into those higher level drafted players. So he was kind of reluctant and hesitant in those zone areas and against UCLA, and you'd like to see him make a few more plays, especially when he's in place with those athletic gifts to be able to. He's physically capable of doing them. It's just like his brain isn't up to date with his like physical capabilities, and if he can sync those up a bit more with more experience playing or a different scheme or a better utilization, then I think he could be a guy that we're talking about as like maybe a steal, but is definitely going to be drafted highly because of those athletic traits in general.
Okay. And the last safety Oh, and Michael Taft from Texas.
So, I mean, you can just go run back and listen to our game preview of Texas versus Florida from last week. So, so you could just run that back if you really wanted a in-depth breakdown of Michael Taft. But a guy that undersized, right? We have him here listed at 6', 189, easily the lightest player we've talked about, and I've even heard conflicting reports that that's shorter than 6 foot and less than 180, at 189 at least. So he's going to be a guy that come combine time, if he does measure and weigh in, he's going to have to. It might not benefit him as much because he's not going to test the best either. He's not going to have the greatest measurables, which is kind of what killed. I'm trying to remember the name of the player. I really love this tape. He was coming out of Miami, safety, and he's now the Cameron Kitchens. Cameron Kitchens was a safety out of Miami a few years ago, and he came into the combine and he was like red. His combine testing was god awful. But you watch the tape at Miami, and it's like, okay, he's a ball player. He can go out there and make plays. And now for the Rams, he's out there making plays as their starting safety, even though he dropped off the face of the earth as a draft prospect because he just didn't have those desirable measurables. You go from this kind of Jim's kind of poking the bear a bit, going from us covering Wheatley right before covering Taft, but it's like the polar opposites of players, where Taft is the defensive leader for Texas. He's the guy who has the brains behind the operation, is able to operate that defense, be in the right positions, and make plays despite physical limitations. Whereas you look at Wheatley, he's a guy that makes plays because of his physical outstandingness, but he doesn't often put himself in positions to succeed mentally before he has to react with those athletic traits. So Taft is a player that you need a starter at safety. I think you could get one with him, but he may fall down boards because of his athletic scoring and his underwear testing. But for like, if you have a good grade on him from the tape, similar to like I was saying with Kitchens back when he was coming out, stick with that grade and see how it works out. And so far with Kitchens, the guy I keep bringing up, it's worked out in the NFL now because if you can play ball, you can play ball, and that's all that really matters. And not just sometimes combine can really lead teams or fans astray from how good a football player really is, despite this long resume of what they've done in college on tape.
And Jake, what do you have of Michael Taft?
I mean, perhaps the Devontae Smith of safeties, where it's like, oh, maybe you know what? It might not matter. It just might not matter that he's a little smaller. I think you should go back and listen last week because I think it's probably the best discussion you're going to get, where it's like kind of like this feels like the sequel to the Michael Taft conversation, where it's like it might not be as good as the first time. But I will say, when it comes to kind of putting together kind of physically, how he is transitioning from back pedal to trigger downhill, how he flips the hips and turns, like all of this stuff of like how fluid you can look in coverage when you're moving, as well as triggering downhill as a linear player. Cerebral, I think, is the right word to describe him, where it's just simply like, all right, yeah, you're in a match look, and maybe it's 3-match or, just strictly zone coverage. Like, he just feels like he knows where he needs to be. He knows where to be in the right spot at the right time, and he will make plays. He is physical to catch point as well, right? And I think he is somebody who, of this group, if you asked one of them to go play corner, obviously he's the guy I'm asking, simply because I think he has the temperament and demeanor to do it. Yes, Wheatley would be fun doing it for sure because of the athleticism, but like I feel like as a guy who would do a nice job matching guys off the line of scrimmage and understanding what receivers are trying to do when they're setting stuff up, I would trust him, I think, over everybody else. He tracks the ball like a receiver when he's playing out there. So yeah, a guy as well, we're kind of talking about as well, like special teams production. That's also there. Like, he is going to buy into that. I have no doubts. I just feel like he is probably the player that we'll talk about during the cycle. I think I probably mentioned this last week of like, he's the guy who's, and maybe Owen mentioned, he's the guy who's going to go into the rooms and the interviews and just kind of knock it out of the park, right? Where teams are going to be really impressed because he knows yeah, this coverage has this responsibility. If I'm back here, this is my responsibility, right? Based on the route combination, I need to be here. Like he knows all of that. And the underwear Olympics won't deter him. I don't think either. If you come away like, you know, I didn't like the 40 or, you know, I didn't like X, Y, or Z, like, but then you go watch the drills and then you go watch him, you know, perhaps in an all-star circuit, or, you know, you just go back to the film, you go, okay, yeah, this is a great football player. I don't know what we're doing here. As long as we feel comfortable, you know, either of him adding, you know, into the upper 190s if he can. As far as the weight, like, I think we're in good shape here. We need a football player. We're gonna go get one. Like, we're not gonna mess around with the athletic guys who, you know, are gonna get drafted early, who, you know, might need more time than him. We know we need a player on the back end of our defense. Let's go get one. Like, that just feels like who he's gonna be.
Awesome. So those were the 9 safeties that we were going to cover today. Owen, you want to introduce yourself and introduce everybody to the Weekly Huddle?
Yeah, so my name is Owen over from the Weekly Huddle. I have a YouTube channel over there at Weekly Huddle on YouTube. I also over on Twitter at Weekly Huddle. I do content. I'm right now in a bit of a hiatus from posting stuff outside of the Draft Professors with coaching still going on and wrapping that up. But I was previously, before now being a football coach, I was a scout for the University of Buffalo, and I make content both breaking down film. I will eventually put a video out updating my series on playing with a all rookie fantasy team, which we're 2-3 now, baby. 2 wins in a row, back-to-back weeks. The all rookie team is really turning it on right now in the middle of the fantasy season. But I have a bunch of different fun topics. I have a bunch of stuff in the chamber that I really have kind of like more pet projects that when I'm in the break from the draft cycle and I'm a break from coaching, I need something to really work on. I have stuff I've been tinkering with for a bit of time now. So there's definitely some projects I'm excited to go put out there. But other than that, yeah, I'm on here at the Draft Professor on Wednesdays now, breaking down prospects and getting ready for the draft. And soon we'll be moving on to probably potentially 2 nights a week. So you can catch me here 9 p.m. most days, especially in the middle of the week there.
Yeah. I love having you around, and I'm looking forward to Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So we'll have more details to follow tomorrow.
Yeah.
But Jake.
Yeah, so you can follow me at Jake NFL Draft on Twitter. That'll give you kind of links to all the things I'm doing. Currently trying to put some projects together, especially, you know, as somebody who really enjoys the wide receiver position. That's, you can get a lot of breakdowns on some of that on the Substack, on YouTube. Working on a couple things currently on JSN's kind of level up in year 3 and how good Ibuka just continues to be, which is just awesome to watch. Like, so you get a lot of those type of breakdowns. Working on a little something about Justin Jefferson's college days that I think will be really exciting to take a look at. But yeah, doing a lot of stuff with film breakdowns of the NFL, the receiver position, and a lot of draft stuff, and of course some Green Bay as well.
Well, welcome to the Draft Professor, everybody. We just covered 9 safeties. We're going to cover 8 more next week. The safeties that are on the docket for next week include TJ Metcalf from Michigan, Bishop Fitzgerald from USC, Rod Moore from Michigan, Bray Hubbard from Alabama, Emmanuel McNeil Warren from Toledo, Bud Clark from TCU, Cole Wisniewski from Texas Tech, and Robert Spears Jennings from Oklahoma. And again, we're really at this point focusing more on the day 3 safeties than the day 2 or the day 1. So, you know, as talking with Owen and Jake, we were just trying to make sure that we had a good handle on the safeties that we should be monitoring as we're building draft boards. So Draft Professor is here every day. So some of the podcasts we have are listed below. But just to give you an idea, we're here at 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern every day. Each podcast gets different positions. So on Monday, you will see defensive line at 9 p.m. Then on Tuesdays, you see wide receivers at 7:30, followed by offensive line at 9. It will probably be Owen on Tuesdays doing offensive line starting in 2 weeks. We will have more details to follow after a production meeting tomorrow. Wednesdays, We did the cornerbacks at 7 o'clock today. We did safeties at 9. We have one more episode of safeties next week. After that, Newt Weston returns, and Owen and Newt will be here doing defensive line. And we appreciate Jake keeping Newt's seat warm, kind of thing. So, we're just shifting from one Packers fan to another.
Jake agrees with me way too much. We need to get Newt back in here so we can have some arguments for full episodes.
Yeah. And then Thursdays, we're doing running backs. Fridays, we're doing tight ends, followed by corners. When tight ends finish, that rolls over to linebackers. So basically, tight ends and linebackers Friday at 7, corners Friday at 9. Saturdays, we do offensive line at 10 a.m. Sundays, you will see Jake, you will see Jack Brentnall, and you will see Drew Collins doing defensive line as well. So there's 3 different defensive line podcasts. I will make sure that they're not covering the same players in the same week, but all the podcasts are covering the same players. So if you end up just, getting addicted to us and you just want to binge watch all week, you won't see the same player, but you may hear Owen do a player this week that you're going to see Jake evaluating in 2 weeks. And the only way that won't happen is that if Owen says a player is undraftable, they don't get put in Jake's group. If Jake says a player is undraftable, they don't get put in Owen's group. So I'll take a player out and put a new player in, kind of thing, because we have plenty of players that can be evaluated. And we're going to be doing that all the way through the month of December. So if you like the draft, or you're a fan of the Saints or the Giants or the Titans, where you're not really playing for anything, you can just start watching the channel now. We'll help you. So I have a question for you guys. So out of all of the safeties that we covered today, Owen, how many of them were new to your board?
So new, as in we didn't cover them previously. I had Peyton Bowen, obviously was one I previously covered. Miles Scott from Illinois, Taft. But so the majority of them outside of those guys were new. So Halsey, Husky, Wheatley, and who was the Earl Little? Those guys, I had a name names. I heard them previously. I from watching an LSU game here or there. I've seen Halsey on on television broadcast, and Earl Little I knew because I followed maybe out of spite the Kalen DeBoer adventure over in Alabama a bit too closely. So I was paying attention to the exodus of talent when he came over there, including the exodus of talent from Washington to Alabama. But I knew his name. I just never really dove that deeply into it, especially because I was not watching Florida State film last year. Or I was watching the film, but not games live enough where I was like, okay, I'm not going to watch this guy for the 25 class. I'm not going to watch Florida State if I don't have to. But they definitely had some guys that were on my radar, but for grade wise, majority of these guys I had yet to lay eyes on in a scouting sense, and I'm actually pleasantly surprised by what I was able to stumble in on here.
Jake, how about you? How many of the players for the episode today were new watches?
So let's see here. It was the 3 that I knew of and had seen were Terry Moore, Miles Scott, just being an Illinois fan already, had already seen plenty, and then Taft. So I think the new ones were Wheatley, Bowen, Husky, Halsey, and then Little as well. So.
Okay, and apparently I skipped Genesis Smith this week, so we'll add him to next week's show.
Nice and easy.
There we go.
Yep.
One down for next week already.
Yep.
Feels good.
So, yeah, I was looking at the list. I thought Taft was the last, but apparently there was one more. So for Owen, for Jake, for myself, for the 100 podcasters at the Draft Professor, thank you very much for watching. Go ahead and hit subscribe if you're there on YouTube. It's the best thank you can give for being here. We will be on a podcast again tomorrow at 7. Thank you so much and have a great night, everybody.